Hey lovely people. So I thought I'd make a message for my Patreon audience, which is suddenly growing. And it's only small, so there's not many of you there at the moment. And even better, that's kind of a more of an intimate kind of like getting to know you all. And at the moment, I got to be honest with you, I don't know nearly all of you. I've asked a few of you for your date of birth. To see if I can work out this new model which I've posted, and you guys are the only ones who can see that at the moment, because I'm working on that and I'm thinking about that, and I obviously want to do all the overlays and before I start making it broadly available to everyone. But and it is available pretty much. Well, it's not actually, to be honest with you, fair enough, but I did go through it very briefly the other day, very quickly, so you are quite and I haven't really made the follow-up video with it. I did a very loose kind of throwing it out there, and I've made it available, but it's going to change my life. This new model is going to change my life, and I've got a funny feeling if you kind of see the work that's gone into that, from all of us, from you, from me, from all of us who've been participating in getting all this information and working with it one way or another. You know, you can see in the old model how I didn't know the forward motion of our sun when I built that last model. Can you imagine that? So to calculate it based on the incomings and the goings out, forgetting completely the kind of this access kind of point between the between the 21st of January and the 21st of December, this point where we get the access that comes into becomes perpendicular to the front and the back, the forward and the reverse of our movements. But you know, we don't know. I didn't know what that access point truly represented. It should have been so obvious, but you know, we're kind of working backwards here. We are working backwards with all of this, you know, and so I was still confused, and I wasn't that far out with that other model. Like I say, we wouldn't have been able to. You know, it looks quite simple there, doesn't it? And also the movements of all these objects, all this this number 12 that reoccurs in all the numbers. It's just Jupiter and its moons. And the reason why they all have these similar numbers is because it's the speed of these objects that decides their their orbital parent. If something's travelling past the system and it's travelling too fast, yes, it's going to have a change in its its direction in the scheme of things, because it's going to go in and it's going to go off, but it's not going to come back round. There is a whole angle that is associated with the open and closed orbits, that when something comes in and relative to its speed and its gravitational mass, you know, it that's the difference. It's like it goes from, you know, from open and closed orbit to a go from a closed orbit where it's going to keep coming back. And so we can see that these objects that are coming around the sun from whatever we're going to call it, whether we're going to call it Jupiter, because they've all got these orbital mechanics of Jupiter. That's why all these planets have the same number. It's like, oh my god, this is so cosmic. But our understanding of the movements of these planets has been massively thrown upside down, and it's all our computer technology. It's all our computer technology right now that is enabling us to, you know, I'm no marvel in computer technology, but just taking these basic instruments that enable me to build solar systems and then overlay them and create, like I say, cogs, like you see in an orrery. Wow, it's just Galileo would have, you know, what would you know, that, you know, it's kind of like our ancestors didn't have this type of technology. You know, we can ask for the first time the what if questions and play with all these different ideas that we've been given. And anyway, you know, what this is all about now is, what does this model mean for you? What does it offer you? You know, that's what you've all invested in. So you could also see that you've also began a journey with me by investing in this channel and saying, I'm going to help Dave. Dave's building this model and he's trying to kind of he's up to something, and I'm going to invest in him, which means I'm going on a journey with him. I'm going on a journey with Dave Dobbs. And I really want to invite you into that, because years ago I was in England. And statues and carvings of Nandi and Ganesh started to drink milk. And I don't know if you heard about that in 1995. It was like it was late September or early October 1995, and milk offerings were being kind of consumed by these kind of like these consorts of Shiva all across India, all across the world. It was coming in, it was on the front cover of every newspaper, and then suddenly it got to about midday and it stopped. And the news stopped and said, oh, it's all over, it stopped. You put the milk up to the statue and the milk just stays in the vessel. It doesn't kind of get lifted up or sucked up or whatever the kind of notion. It was so massive that the press were scared to call it a miracle. And everyone was just umming and ahhing, but no one believed it. No one believed it. Well, I can't say no one believed it, because I didn't disbelieve it. I was just so perplexed by it, because I just thought, you know, it came out, the official kind of like narrative of the mainstream media after you know, being on all the main channels, on the front cover of all the newspapers the next morning. It was just like, it was back in the day, the news channels had the news first, didn't they? Now it's a very different story now with YouTube and that sort of stuff. They're last to tell you what's going on. They're like and then the newspapers, and then the kind of like now it's kind of, you know, it's social media and but so I was perplexed. And at the time I was living in Brighton. I had absolutely no money, like literally no money. I was on the dole, but they wouldn't give me the money for the housing, and the whole situation was just like, and the people that I'd owed money to, the landlords, were really horrible. It was like every time going up to their offices was like a scene out of Ricky Gervais's office. The whole thing was just, you know, it was just obscure, and I felt like I was hanging off the edge of a cliff, constantly thinking I was going to get kicked out of this flat, and all the stories were going on, and parking tickets and and kind of like everything was going on, and it was just a real tough mad time. It was when all the squatters were squatting the West Pier, the one that eventually caught fire, and all the drummers were down on the beach in Brighton. It was like something out of like Venice Beach in on the West Coast in America, and it was just like, it was a magical time in Brighton's history. It was a magical time, and it was a feeling. It was, you know, Brighton was massively part of the whole kind of like the anarchist triangle between Bristol, London, Brighton. It was where it was all going off. That's where it was like a cosmic convergence then in Brighton. It was just an absolutely fantastic time. It was an amazing time, and I'd been travelling all over the world, and I'd finally come back from wherever I'd come back from. I'd been, well, I hadn't, you know, I go away and I come and go sometimes, you know, for years sort of thing, and I just come back from a major sort of major adventure, and I was kind of like got stuck in England. I'd been stuck in England for nearly kind of like 10 months or something, with no money, and everything was just a desperate situation, and I'd had a big business in Hong Kong before. I had an advertising agency in Hong Kong before, and And I'd left it all because realising that I didn't want to do that. Even though I'd managed to get into that whole thing, I'd left it all and didn't want to do that and wanted to come back. And I was just going to crazy parties, truth be told. And I was stuck in this place, and like I say, the dogs, the gods. I'm walking shanty here, so I got dogs on my head. Sorry, the gods have stopped drinking this milk, and I went down to the Canada, down to Brighton seafront, and I was talking to all the people down there. The only people I could talk to about it, because everyone else was just like, "Oh, I think it's just a hoax." I said, "But what happens if it isn't a hoax? What happens if I can't believe a miracle? What happens? What happens if I'm absolutely inert? I am insensitive to the grace of a miracle. If I was actually shut down, that a blatant miracle, that my God was so supreme that I was utterly walled off to that I could not see that. I could only meet that with doubt and disbelief. Cold doubt and disbelief. Nothing impenetrable to my being. Shanty, what are you doing? Little Shanty. He's there. He's there. He's there. So the upshot of it was I spoke to a few people, and then I was just like, and only the drummers down on the West Pier, they were the only ones who were like, yeah man, it's Pavati's birthday coming up. I was like, Pavati? It was like, yeah, like Shiva's missus, Shiva the consort. No, Shiva's wife is kind of like his counterpart, So I was just like, no, when? And it was just like, it was coming up on. I didn't even know that eclipses only happen on a new moon, as in solar eclipses, where the sun blocks out where the moon blocks out the sun. And it's just like, no way. So I kind of like, so I rang my mum, and I was just like, Mum, and she was on the dole. It's not like she could help me. She was so broke, bless her little cotton socks. She was living in Shoreham in this flat, or in this house that she'd bought with the last of her pennies when she split up with my old man, and she managed to get this house and this tiny little house right on the outskirts when they were still quite cheap, and you could get, Anyway, she got this little house, and so she was on the dole. She literally didn't have any money. But I've just rung her. I said, Mum, I think I've got to be in India. I was like, do you think what? It's just like there's this eclipse happening. I was like, I just feel. And she said to me, sweetheart, all I can tell you is that if I could pay, I would. But I can tell you, a man like you doesn't think about where the money's coming from. He just thinks about whether or not he's going. And to begin and take the first step. And I was like, yeah. I think I'm going to go. I think I'm going to take the first step. I said, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to take the first step. I was like, what can I do? And what can I do now? I said, I could go and get a visa, couldn't I? I could just go and get a visa for India. I could just act like I'm going, be bold and just roll up. Because if I don't get the visa, I definitely ain't going. But if I've got a visa, at least I can go. At least the door's open to whatever eventuality. And I have effectively began on some form or other. Began the journey. I'm going to be in the Indian embassy, for God's sake. That's the nearest damn being in India. So I was just like, so I did that, and I went up, and I fell madly in love with this girl in the embassy, and so began the cosmic miracles. And then, I get home and I find the letter, housing benefit. Desperate times. Anyway, so cosmic convergence. I end up in Delhi, and funny because I meet these people in Delhi, and I'm just like, it's before internet, before telephones, and I'm like, which party are you going to? And they're like, what party? And I said, well, there's going to be a cosmic convergence the size we just cannot believe happening in India, like imminently. I said, but I just don't know where. I was like, there's no forums, it's like the days of Castle Morton. It was just, a few people had mobile, not mobile telephone numbers. They knew they knew the phone numbers of a few kind of phone boxes here, there, and everywhere. People had a few numbers, and people just using a few telephones just to kind of convey. But to have one of the biggest cosmic convergences this country's ever seen, outside of Stonehenge, in terms of but that's organised, that's known, in terms of what happened in Castle Morton in about 92, it was just like, a whole different ball game. But anyway, so they were like, no, we're going to meet some people up in the mountains. I was like, don't be daft, they're not going to be there. I said, when do you speak to them? And they were like, oh, blah, blah, blah. I was like, don't be fucking daft, they ain't going to be there. Where are they going to be? They're going to be at the fucking party. They were like, no, we've arranged to meet. I said, times change. I said, I've only just worked this thing out in the last month. They're going to be there. Where else are they going to be? They're going to be at the fucking mountains. And they were like, no, you're not right. It's funny because I bumped into them in Goa and they were like, oh my God, why didn't we listen to you? My God, we're so fucking stupid. No one was there. They were all at the fucking party. I was like, well, fucking course they were. I was like, maybe you needed to do that just to wake up a little bit and smell the fucking coffee. Don't we all need to smell the coffee a little bit? It's just like, aren't there some things that are just fucking obvious? Anyway. I digress a little bit there, sorry about that. So So anyway, people say, oh, there's I said, where's the most sacred place on this pathway? And people say Agra because of the Taj Mahal or whatever they call it. Is it the Taj Mahal, something like that? And then I was just like, yeah, let's go. It's a nice bit of architecture. What's all around it? And they were like, oh, it's quite close to cities, blah blah blah. And already I was thinking cities. I was thinking I'm seeing deserts and camels and kind of like. And they were like, oh, you'd have to go to Pushkar. I was like, does the line go through Pushkar? And they're like, oh yeah, there's a camel fair. There's a camel fair at the time of the eclipse, just leading up into the eclipse, a massive camel fair. They come from all over, kind of like they all come from all over. All the nomads come from all over the desert. I was like, no, you are having a laugh. So I made my way to Pushkar because that was going to be on the line, and then there was a massive convergence. And I meet this guy, and I said to him, and his name was Bhatta. His name was Bhatta, and he was this Brahmin kind of. But he was a Brahmin Baba. And then I said, listen, I want to learn about Shiva. And he said, Shiva like Brahman. He said, you meet in the desert. And I was like, well, could you take me to meet Shiva? Literally, I asked him, and he said, yeah, I can take you to meet Shiva. I was like, I want to go with you to meet Shiva, because I was fully charged. By this time, I was in. When you begin the journey, this is the thing is, once you begin a cosmic journey, you're in. You've committed. And if your cosmic journey is aligning with a cosmic, majestic alignment, then every part of your life is going to align with a celestial cosmic alignment. All that you do will align with that. And I've been wrong. I've been wrong with my cosmic alignment of where I've been seeing the sun going in this model. And it got so complex for my mind. The models are so unbelievably complex. Even though suddenly it's laid bare like that in a thing, for me to get my mind to that place hurts. It hurts. But it's a dynamic. It's where we are going in the scheme of things in terms of to our cosmic connection and our cosmic alignment. So anyway, I keep digressing, but it's all kind of like, the whole thing becomes, in my mind, a parable in itself, for me, because it was just like, I was aligned with this not a belief, with this divine connection in allowing this occurrence to be a miracle and treating it as such, and taking a step into that and walking and making decisions with the alignment of that, with the connection to Bhavati, with connection to celestial benevolence and abundance and peace and beauty and excitement and wonder and awe. And I hadn't had that. I'd never ever gone anywhere truly with that massive connection in my life. I'd never walked with a direct connection to a place of pilgrimage. I never brought that into my life. Holy. Anyway, so I went with this guy. A few people said, you know, careful with the bubbers. They're not all saints. You know, there's some of them are. Anyway, you know, there was some warning, you know, and I was just like, you know, I've got to be a bit careful. And we get out of town, and he says to me, so you know, you have a girlfriend? And there's a few of us. He's got his whole family. He's got a whole bunch of camels going on. I'm in the back of this kind of like in this kind of wagon. I just want to walk in the desert. Really, I'm feeling like I'm being kind of like I'm being chauffeured in the back of on the back of his truck, and we're just bouncing along. And I feel kind of like a little bit like, yay, you know, it's a thing. And and he says, so you have a girlfriend? I'm like, no. And we go a little bit further, and he says, hey, you know, I have a girlfriend. And I was just like, well, you know, I just wanted to know. I kind of like ladies. Everything's cool, and you know, he's just like, you know, ladies is kind of like, and he was just like, so you not have a girlfriend? So I'm just like, look, I tell you what, there was a girl, and I meet her, and I got this massive connection with her, and yeah, I kind of like her, and I met her in love, but she's not here. Well, she may be here. I said she may be here, but she's, you know, meet her in London, but she's going to come, but you know, how to find her, I don't know where she is. And he said, oh, the girl with the goggle. And I was like, does she wear goggles? So I think I didn't wear goggles then, and I was just like, yeah, she did have these kind of odd round glasses. And he pulls his camel aside, and this girl is standing there. I was just like, I nearly fell off my horse, nearly fell off my camel, my, whatever you called it, cart. I nearly fell off my cart. Yeah, and then I can remember going up to the market. When we got back from our little kind of like journey to find Shiva. I mean, he just basically taken me into the desert and didn't mess around, showed me Shiva basically, and I fell mad in love and blah blah blah, and I saw this whole eclipse through these eyes of love, and I'd got this connection, and of course, you know, it was just like so many of these things. Well, I mean, but anyway, I had this mad thing at this eclipse. I looked at the eclipse, and during the eclipse I watched it, and as the eclipse, it was a mad party. It was a beautiful party. It was the wildest party I'd ever been to in my life, and it was just absolutely beautiful, 24 hours non-stop, kind of ecstatic kind of dance. And it wasn't like I was taking any drugs or anything, you know. I could have probably taken loads of acid, loads of everything, but the vibe was just so high, just so happy. All you could do was dance. It was like literally all you could do. I've never seen a party, you know. My idea of a trance party, I didn't know what a trance party was. I'd never been to anything, never been down to Goa, never seen Goa trance or the old school where it was just everyone just floating on a wave, just bouncing and floating on a wave, and just kind of utter kind of like bliss where your knees just seem these springs, and you just bounce, and everyone's just absolutely simultaneously bouncing, which I just don't see in the kind of modern world. But I do see dance becoming this thing that is just amazing. You know, the levels of dance that people do now is breathtaking. You know, that's one of the amazing things about internet and TikTok and some of these channels, is that they've so much creativity is occurring now. So much creativity. There's some really good things that's coming out of all this. You know, instead of having just when the Smiths came out and all the whole indie music thing, and it was just like they took control, or people like Ed Sheeran taking control of all of us, having to kind of take control of our own content one way or another, because the big boys are just gonna, you know, I've seen so many times my book being sold, or so many people have bought my book and they paid like £3 for a second-hand copy, you know, and that's the way it goes. So, you know, and I've just never ever sold a single book. I've never sold a single book on the internet. And yet people buy second-hand books because of the whole way in which they run it. They won't even let me sell one book before they're kind of calling it second-hand. I mean, you'd expect to at least have one, and then you say, like, okay, they're all that same one second-hand, but to not even print one and to sell second-hand copies, not even kind of like, you know, this is the power of, it's the power of getting it out there. But for most part, you get it out there on someone else's platform and you're getting kind of dicked over. So we're not really that much more powerful, but at least there is the possibility for the smaller person getting their stuff out there. And that is a reason to do it. And that is the reason that most of us are kind of like enter into most kind of endeavours, and you know, finding the reason to create and to go forth and do the things that you do, and to connect that journey that you might be on to a place where there's a reason to do it. And sometimes being good in the eyes of what you see and in the light of what you see is a good action and a good deed. That can be a good reason to do things, can't it? And these are all the sort of things that our reasoning, and that's what I want you to think about if you want to come on this journey with me to a special place on the 21st of June this year, because that's where this model is feeding to. So I've posted you an interpretation of where the planets potentially were at the times when you were all born. And have a think about it. Go to that time, go to that place, go to that point of arrival for you. You know, I'm Saturn returning now, and I put Saturn on my new model as in how we're told it is. And of course I don't think that is the case at all. I don't think, you know, it's ironic, like I explored in when I posted my last video, that, you know, when we're all kind of like wondering what the kind of like the you know, if there's no planet that's got an 84-year orbit, then what does the 84 represent? As I said before, is it 3 cycles of 28, which is 3 cycles of pretty much of 1, 8, 2, 16, 20, yeah, is it 3 cycles of Saturn, remembering a whole kind of like a whole Christian kind of celebration, as in Christmas celebration that we're all celebrating, bears much more resemblance to the kind of like the kind of ancient Roman celebrations. It's like we're still just celebrating, the whole story of Jesus, and the fact that Jesus, through Jesus' blood, we can redeem ourselves. When actually Jesus can says only through your own blood can you redeem. You cannot get redemption through someone else's blood. You cannot. His God accepts no blood sacrifice, so we cannot drink the blood of Christ and expect that He didn't die for our sins. He died to show the way, to show that there was a journey through. You cannot use someone else's blood. That runs in contrary to what we're kind of like. It's funny because I'm saying that right now because ironically I've been over Christmas and New Year I've honestly, money's been so down. This is not a kind of hard luck story. This is just like the reality of the situation. His money's been so tough that there's been very little money around, and I've been feeling that I'd had to kind of change this model, desperately had to change this model, I had to upgrade it, and had to do the last bit. So and there's been troubled dynamics, and every time I try and work out one person's or anyone's date of birth and that last planet, I just stumble and I hit the mathematical problem of the mistakes I've incorporated in that model, and so I can't make those thoughts and those dynamics in my head work, if you like, because my head is like projecting through this as an idea to kind of understand my forward motion in the scheme of things and how things come in and interact thereof. No zodiac can be really built if you cannot truly understand where you are in the scheme of that. If it's just your mind is just close to that, and it's just a belief, it's just a kind of like, and it's an unknown. It's a disconnect. It's not sufficient for my head because I can't make that work. I can't apply my mind into it because there's not got a what my friend would call a datum point. And for us, the datum point is our fundamental forward motion of our sun that holds it all together. It's like you're riding a bike. You need to kind of get an idea of where you're going and how you're moving along and operate. You're putting energy into this bicycle by pushing it along, and now you've got a balance on it. So we are, if you like, going along with our sun that's orbiting the Milky Way of whatever we're suggesting is the big galactic hole that we're all in. And then our sun is in these relationships with what it appears to be orbiting, but it is in a speed-related relationship. It's not bound by its mass, but it's bound by its speed, its relative speed to what it's orbiting, which means that we can understand that the sun itself must be moving a relatively similar kind of speed to Earth for them to have this orbital relationship, or the Earth would just go shooting past it and carry on going. As with all the planets orbiting it, it is their speed that creates the its orbital relationship, and so it's the speed that is where all the energy is being held, and mass is deriving its energetic qualities. And anyway, so I'm forgetting where I'm going in the scheme of things, but and I guess that's actually where I'm going in the scheme of things, is where we are going in the scheme of things, and that's basically whenever you get lost, it all comes back to that, where we are going in the scheme of things, and that's really what this is all about. Is where are you going in the scheme of things? You know what? You need to do a bit of intention tracking for this journey. Intention tracking is kind of thinking, why do I do the things I do? Have I got bad intentions? Am I trying to hurt anyone? Am I trying to maim anyone? Am I trying to kill anyone? Do I have good intentions for the coming future? Think about what your intentions are, what you want to be doing, and what you want to exist in your life at the time of this coming flyby. What do you envisage should be beneficial to you and to all beings How could you be in service to something higher for this process? Is there anything you can give back to Great Spirit in the process of being at this time and this place? And this is, like I talk about, it's 61 volcanoes going off in July, in August, September, 51 in October, November, and now, it's just been flooding across the country in England. It's just been absolutely amazing. My boat has been flooded. It's on the end of all its ropes. It's come up. The water level's come up higher than it's come up since 1968. Since 1968, when the last water level, was it 1960? I think it was the year I was born. It came up high, but it's come up high since then. It came, I predicted every time it's going to come high, and we know that, we're in the midst of a massive flyby here. It's we're in it now, and we've been experiencing this flyby, this part, for years and years and years. Well, certainly since 2016, 2017, when I'd made my first videos about predicting it. Not that that was the first time I'd known about it. I had just calculated by that stage that there was a 200-day anomaly. And I was just falling off my chair backwards, just like not believing that this thing was really happening, that every 200 days. And that boiled down to 396 days, which was the number, as I often describe, of Jupiter. The first time I'd observed that these planets have this kind of like this odd characteristic. And that's why they all had the same characteristic, because they're all from Jupiter. They all have the same relative speed of that little family of planets. And so we can understand their relationships, and why certain bodies of certain planets don't interfere with other bodies of other planets, because of that relative speeds don't coincide. And so when you want to migrate a planet to another place, you're talking about changing its overall relative speed, or keeping its relative speed and increasing its mass. Imagine if you took a planet like Earth, and say Earth had been orbiting Jupiter at one stage, and once it was not Jupiter, because Jupiter orbits a sun-like object that we occasionally see but rarely do. But imagine if we once orbited the same object Jupiter orbits, not the sun as we understand it today, not the heliocentric model that we've been in for the last 500 years, but say that the Jupiter orbited another object, as I'm suggesting, and the Earth orbited another object with Jupiter, and then Earth was moved, and then Earth was much smaller then, suggesting, because we can see the Earth was much smaller, and then you increased the mass. You injected magma into it, and you kept it at the same speed, but you increased its density, and it suddenly slingshot way from where it was existing orbiting place, and potentially slowed it down a bit in the terms of its sudden mass, just suddenly adding to its speed, potentially. What that reaction would be, but say you increase its density simply to throw it off its existing orbit and cause it to catch another sun coming in, and thus increasing its. Imagine all the animals on that world when it was very, very light density, like birds flying around. Everything would be the birds of the sky, wouldn't they? They would be the fish of the sky, because you'd one jump and you'd be flying through the air, that you'd have to kind of develop wings and feathers and big palms to move yourself around in the air. Everything would be forced to develop wings. And then suddenly the density just massively increases overnight. A massive event occurs. half the world is opened up, and an event happens where not just all the oceans but all the magma arrive on Earth, and boom, suddenly Earth is bigger. Two worlds merged into one world destroyed and the other created, like one pumped into the other, and some big process goes on that leaves us where we are now. The arrival of the oceans, the arrival of a lot of mass into the centre of the earth expands, and we find ourselves here on this journey, watching these most incredible sightings of these most incredible things, watching our governments do what they've done for time immemorial, and so here we are in the blood sacrifice times. I was going to say earlier, but I didn't want to say because I'd scare the living daylights out of you, but there was this channel material by this guy called Levi, I think, and it was the Gospel of Jesus. It was published in 1844, and I went to see my dad at Christmas, and I talked about this arc that I show you in my model that goes from in 1939 to now, or right up to kind of August, September this year, 2024. We see how Jupiter has affected us from kind of like December, January to 2024, and we see how the earthquakes and volcanoes have got bigger and bigger and bigger from July, August, and so on and so forth. And I said that's the arc. I call this the arc, and the arc of the light. This is the fifth dimension. This is the point. This is where they wage war. This is the point we're in right now. The same point, 1939 to 1945, is the same point from about 2018 to 2024. 2017. It began with Trump's inauguration, and goes to 2024, August, September. That's the conclusion of it. And for my big first flyby that I showed, that was the beginning of it. I didn't even know that was the beginning of it. I certainly didn't know Trump was going to be running, but it is my dad. So I told my dad about it, and he said, "God, it reminds me of this thing I read years ago." He said he'd come back he'd been travelling around the Middle East years ago, selling his blood in war-torn areas, and he'd caught some kind of illness, and he'd end up with horrible hepatitis, and it really affected him, and he got very, very sick, and he was sick for years with it, and it's caused so many problems later in his life. But he had this guy come around. He used to give him healing, and he said this guy turned up, and I know this is really rude. Excuse me. I'm going to put this over here. I so need a wee, and I can't stop this halfway through. And this is my thing, so I'm just going to go over here and have a wee, and hopefully you won't see me. But he said he saw these colours, and he said this guy gave him healing, and he wouldn't touch him because my dad felt uncomfortable about it. And then after 7 days, he said he could feel it every day. And on the 7th day, he said he didn't feel it, and so he rang him back, and he said I didn't feel the thing, and he said, "Oh, that's because I didn't send it on the 7th day." And he said, "Oh, that's mad." And then so the guy did some more healing on him, and he said, "Listen, I've had a message for you." He said, "You're going to do the work of Great Spirit. You're going to be here working with Great Spirit, and you're going to have spiritual work to do on this plane." And he said, "When it begins, he said, when it begins, you'll see green light. And sure enough, he you know, it was when he was younger, before he had kids and that sort of stuff, and this is what made him a spiritual being. And so when my mum and dad got together, he was like a spiritual being. He saw himself as on the spiritual path, and she thought it was a load of old bullshit. And not that she said that, obviously, but she didn't think it was that. And then she was the one who became the channel. This just can't make it up. It's hilarious. Not that my dad isn't a channel and speaks the words of great wisdom. He does, you know. But he said that he picked this book up and he read this gospel of the gospel of Jesus. Yeah, Shanti, come here. This gospel of Jesus, and he said when he got to this bit, and I said, well, I'd love to read it. And he said, I'm sure it was something to do with the Ark of Heaven, and he read this thing about the Ark of Heaven, and I was just like, oh my God, that just so doesn't sound like the words of Jesus, does it? It's like completely different. And I said, Dad, I want to show you what the Ark of Heaven is. And I showed him on my model that kind of came from 2018 to 2024. I was like, that is the Ark of Heaven. That's the Ark when we're closest to this fifth dimension. That's when we do our blood sacrifice. And we invoke people to kind of drink the blood. Shanti, come on. To drink the blood of our Saviour. Which we cannot do. You know, we're there to offer our own blood for that. I know that sounds crazy, but to have the opportunity of being in service to something else. You cannot drink someone else's blood and connect to divinity. It cannot be done. It's not the God that I serve. I could not drink Jesus' blood and connect with him. Jesus offered his own blood in sacrifice. He died for what he believed. Cannot drink his blood. That's a Roman sacrifice. That's a Roman sacrifice that gives permission to sin and says your sins can be vanquished by the blood of another. I couldn't believe it. I've been reading this Jesus, this tales of Jesus. And in this tales, it's just like Jesus was just like. He was his arrival was foretold, so which means that kind of like I guess it must have been King Herod was absolutely terrified by his arrival, and it was just like, oh my God, everyone's talking about the King of Israel is arriving and gonna get him. So you know that's why John the Baptist was chucked into the cells, and Jesus upped and left. He was taken away from there because it was too dangerous, and he went around the world and he travelled everywhere. And that's the story I've been reading over Christmas and New Year. He travelled to the Brahmins. He travelled to Persia. He travelled to he travelled to Greece. He just seemed like he travelled everywhere. He travelled the globe on all the different trading routes, going everywhere. And he was received by all the different faiths, and he preached to all of them. And he used parables because that's how he just went. So when they said you cannot work on the Sabbath, he was like, and you do not tell me you did not feed the work. Did you not feed your animals this morning? Is that not work? And then it was just like, well, yeah, I've fed the animals, but they're like, well, and you would not heal the wounded? You would not pull your brother from the pit of hell if he was desperate and waiting on the Sabbath because it would be work? And it's just like, he talked in parables because they couldn't understand what they were kind of saying in terms of their laws made no sense into what they would actually do unto themselves and unto their others in daily life. And so it's kind of like, and that's how and they were expecting him to come, and he was healing and making miracles, and he had been they had confirmation, all had confirmation in their own, through their own connection to God, had confirmation of his arrival. They were receiving him. They weren't rejecting him. They weren't all in opposition to him. Some were just throwing their laws at him. They were just deflecting, so they couldn't make anything stick, because he could just turn it upside down and make them feel silly about it. He could just reverse it, what they were saying. And he became, he left as a child with Herod, the king of what would it be? Who was King Herod? Was he king of? Was he king of Israel? Was he king of Palestine? Was he? I'm not too sure. Was he? Who is king? Which area he was even king of? That's terrible, isn't it? But he was terrified by Jesus and all the people following him. So Jesus had left as a boy. When by the time he'd returned to Israel, he had travelled the globe. He was a man, and he had been received by he'd been up in Tibet. He'd been everywhere. He'd been with the Zoroastrians. He'd been with Zarathustra. He'd been with the Brahmins. He'd been with the kind of like. He'd been everywhere. He travelled. He was like Osho. He would have returned up in Palestine like Osho. Turned up in America. He had people following him from all over the globe, everywhere. They were coming to witness the miracle of this man. He didn't just suddenly just become a carpenter and then start kind of like, he was, he would have been like Osho. When I came to America, I came to the reason I went to the party I went to on the 17th of August, 2017, 200 days after exactly 200 days after the previous flyby that I predicted on the 20th of January 2017. Exactly 200 days later, the eclipse happens, but also the flyby happens, and we see the flyby as I'm coming into America, and I went to Bend. But the reason I went to Bend was because everyone thought, oh, Dave's going to England, going to America to be part of a big Christian organisation. And no disrespect to the Christian organisations, but the party I went to was in Bend. It was where Osho built his ashram. I came to connect with Osho, not Jesus, at that gathering, because I believe that Osho was he was like the Messiah for America. When they made that kind of recent documentary on Netflix, they didn't even cover what Osho was really doing, as in Osho was distributing, or Sheila was distributing, as I'm understanding it, or her sannyasins, the women that they were distributing the medicine that they were giving out to couples that are having relationship difficulties. They've got this special medicine. It wasn't called ecstasy, but that's what it was. It was ecstasy, and they were giving it out at these parties, and everyone was turning around saying, "I love you, I love you," and they were expressing emotions of love which they hadn't done before, because this chemical was allowing them to experience that emotion, and suddenly they were just able to. And that's what happened. When I first came to America, I was in New York. I was like 21 years of age. I was working for this guy. I was kind of like got a job as a kind of a bit of a personal assistant. I could barely string a sentence together, and I ended up at this party I ended up walking past with I was earning next to nothing, but I helped this guy move and a bit of his personal assistant, like I say. And I was walking down this road on my own. I had so little money because the guy was barely paying me anything, but he was teaching me loads of stuff. But he was just like, and he was giving me accommodation in his big flashy house. But ultimately, it was just like a crazy kind of time in my life. But anyway, there I was walking down this road with barely a penny or barely a buck in my pocket in New York, and I see this massive party going on. I see all these people queuing up outside this church, and now we were kind of in England at the time. It was all the warehouse parties and the kind of acid house, but they're grungy warehouse parties. Everyone's standing, looking moody on the party, on the dance floor. It's all kind of like, oh mate, not as good as a wink. It was all hard. It was hard. It wasn't fluffy. It wasn't go trance. It wasn't bouncing. Absolute just bliss, just exploding out. It wasn't ecstatic dance. It was moody, kind of like it was dark and moody. It was dark and moody, and Anyway, I see these massive queues outside this church. It was the Limelight Club, and it hadn't long been opened, and it was all a sensation that a church had been turned into a nightclub, and it was sacrilegious, and it all just like, yeah, let's get in there, you know what I mean? I didn't have enough money to get in there. God knows how much it was going to cost. Massive queue. And then I see these two security guards standing in front of these two doors. I see one person go in, they open the door, let her in, and there's no one at the queue, and there's like 1 million people at the queue to get the main queue to get in. So I just kind of went next to the queue where they're all queued up, and I just walked parallel to the queue down towards these doors, and I get to the gates, and they just open the doors, and they just walk straight into the VIP section. And this girl just receives me and she says, "Hi," and I was like, "Hello," and she said, "Do you want some ecstasy?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, I want some ecstasy." And I had the wildest party in there. I met this amazing crew that I used to go out partying like almost every night and kill myself, burning it at all angles, just trying to kind of do the work for this guy and kind of like experience these whole new level of parties that I just couldn't fucking believe were happening in New York, in Alphabet City. You know, it was all just a derelict, dangerous area and all these grungy parties, but the party was just utterly off the radar. Yeah, and that was ecstasy. That was Osho and his influence. You know, he turned up and they said, "You can't build your ashram, you can't do this, you can't do that," and he just arrived and he realized that the power of people was what underwrote our democracy from top to bottom, and he realized he could just outnumber all the people in this town, that they were all mouth and all belief, but when it came to the real power of the people, they were deciding. So he just put all his followers into the town. They all just went on the electoral roll or whatever you call it, outnumbered all the rednecks, and they just fucking got on with building his massive ashram exactly as he said. Obviously now it's all been taken over by Christians and it's all done, and they killed him and everything else like that, but he arrived and his teachings were received by millions and millions of people that went into meditation, peace, wild partying and love and his legacy. So when I came to America, obviously I was going straight to Bend. There was going to be an eclipse on the very ground that he initiated his massive where he brought he was like an explosion of love that arrived in America and changed the course of America more than anyone else I know, as much as Dick Gregory did when he ran for the American president and got like 9 million votes, and they just publicly nicked all his votes and gave them to Richard Nixon. And publicly gave them to Richard Nixon. It wasn't like they hid it. They said, no, the computer systems made a mistake. No way would the American people vote for a black comedian. They openly gave that away. So it wasn't illegal because they declared it. It wasn't a fraud. It was the blatancy of disbelief. Like I didn't believe. Like I struggled to believe that a miracle could exist. And you're going to have to be one side of a miracle or the other. If miracles are controlled for you by belief and doubt, and you meet a miracle with doubt, you cannot go on a pilgrimage if you are in doubt. Doubt and pilgrimage are one and another's nemesis. So you got to decide whether you're going on this journey or not. Whether you want to be part of a pilgrimage and invite that into your life and connect to what that represents, to where our sun is going, and join that celebration and join that direction in the scheme of things. And so your subscription in that is right now is helping me, because you're not going to get too much from me on this at the moment. You never know, I might even end up posting this video up on kind of like up on Patreon, because it's just like up on YouTube at some point. Maybe I will, maybe I won't, but maybe I'll just leave this one here for you guys, and hopefully it will post. It might be too long to post now, but all the love in the world, and thank you for kind of joining me on this little thing. And like I say, if you want to join on this little journey and hook up in your own way to the miracles that could become part of your life right now, not through me, but through your own connection. It doesn't mean that I'm correct in my model, but it's where you're attempting. But I was definitely incorrect in the direction it was going the wrong way. I was going on the dark side, and I felt like I was going on the dark side by saying the 21st of December. And and maybe I'll turn out that is the forward direction, and I've got it all wrong again. So I can't be 100% sure, because with everything that I've observed now and all the information that we've put in so far, it's the 21st of June 2024 will be my first year of aligning myself and being in line with that forward motion at that time. And I'm going to bring in the gods, the highest, most peaceful and benevolent gods, to help with this grand transit. And I'm going to tune it in, and I'm going to begin tuning in. So this arrival of this point to there is, I'm unified with this alignment in my life. And I'm going to attempt to visualize that and bring that in and start thinking about how I'm going to be in service and what I'd like to see happen, where I'd like to be, and what I'd like to see going on. And I'm going to start taking little steps to encourage people to join that journey with me and celebrate with me in any which way they can, and support me in any which way they can. And we're going to make it louder and shout it louder, and we're going to start getting people to think about the forward motion of the sun in the scheme of things, which they don't have at the moment. They don't have in their mind's eye a forward motion of the sun and where they fit into that grand picture. Honey in the heart, 1,000 thank yous so much for a little bit of support at this time. You know, I'm going to go and buy a few bags of coal now to keep me warm. We had a little bit of sun because we had no batteries. Everything's just been like, you know, in one of the chapters in my book, Laughing Gas, I talk about putting the batteries in. Pone las pilas. All my batteries have been flat. So maybe this new dynamic connection of forward motion is going to change all that as well, and bring new fortune and more and harmonize my energy and help me be connect to this grand story and play the part that I was here to play in this grand story. And hopefully this will be your journey into playing the part that you're here to play in this grand journey. So thanks so much for your support, and good luck in your journey. Go onto the model, find out where things were potentially when you were born, and have a think about that. Have a think about that. Have a think about these as the pantheons, as the Egyptian gods, as the Roman gods, as the kind of Mesopotamian gods. You know, however you want to connect with this grand story, just open up all these joys of majestic greatness into this whole thing. Make the bracket as big and as fantastic as possible to open your mind to the fantastical system that you are truly part of. And let that massiveness, expansiveness fill you up with all you need to be to become all that you truly are. So much love. Take care. Ciao.